Giants Live put out a post this week to remind us that Mitch Hooper is on his 20th consecutive podium in a row and described it as unmatched consistency. But is that true? We check out the stats to find out. So clearly, Mitch Hooper is doing incredible things in Strongman. 20 podiums in a row, 12 international wins out of 21 competitions. He's doing amazing things. This year particularly has been, one of the best years we've ever seen in Strongman. But there have been others with incredible performances, incredible consistency that maybe are starting to get forgotten about.
Yeah, maybe. And you know me, I love to get the stats out.
Well, two things that this is very important. One is we love the stats. We love to see what people have done in the past. And two, we like to motivate Mitch Hooper.
Yes.
He needs a bit of motivation, and we can't let him get too ahead of himself. So we've got to remind himself where he stands in the greatness of the strongman world.
Exactly.
So what did you find for us?
Okay, so if we start with his podium streak then, because that's what's getting the most attention right now. And he has a podium streak of 20. Now, looking at the top podium streaks in strongman history, ahead of him is Thor Bjornsson with a streak of 22. Now, that does include some Iceland strongest man.
That's
and you
fine.
said leave it in.
Yeah,
leave it in.
Fine.
Mariusz Pudzianowski has a streak of 26 that he curated, I guess, over a 3-year period. Brian has a streak of 27 that he did over a 4-year period. So Brian with 27, that's quite achievable.
With the way Mitch is going, it definitely looks like it's a possibility.
Yes, however, what's going to be more difficult is trying to beat the number 1 spot, which belongs to Zydrunas Savickas. Now, he has the top 2, really, because he had, from 2004 to 2011, a podium streak of 57. Then he came 4th in a competition, broke the streak, but then he had another streak from 2011 onwards of 41.
That's just insane.
40.
Just ridiculous. I mean, we were looking at streaks of other athletes such as Kiliashkovsky, Novikov, who were around the 10 mark, Lissis.
Yeah.
But to have 57 competitions in a row where you place in the top 3 just shows why Zydrunas is really the greatest athlete we've ever seen in the sport.
Well, realistically, it was almost 100. If he didn't have that gap in there, can you imagine? This is ridiculous.
Mitch has got some work to do to catch that one. However, it's been an amazing start. And I know you've got some other stats that are quite interesting to see where he's comparing against the greats.
So let's move on to winning streaks. Now, he only actually has a streak of 4, but it turns out it's really hard to put together a winning streak at all for many athletes. Like, they might be doing well and hitting podiums, but to actually win consecutive competitions isn't easy.
So where does 4 put him in the grand scheme of things?
So there are only actually 5 men that have done better than that. First off, we've got Mateusz, who has a winning streak of 6, which is really good. So then we have Brian Shaw, who has a winning streak of 8. Very nice. Brian was one of those who was quite select about what he did, but when you look at his streak, it includes some really big shows.
Big shows.
Yes. Yeah. Then you have Mariusz Pudzianowski, who also has 8, but he has it twice. 2 sets of 8 for Mariusz. Of course, they called him the Dominator.
For a reason, yeah.
Yes. Then Thor Bjornsson in 2nd place. He has a winning streak of 9. No prizes for guessing who is first.
And how much by?
A fair bit again, but not as crazy as the podium. So Zydrunas has a winning streak of 17.
I mean, that's insane. I think we're talking about how impressive Mitch Hooper's 20 podiums in a row is. To have 17 wins in a row is just nuts.
So another thing I wanted to look at was win rates. So that's the amount of competitions, like international competitions they've won compared to the amount that they've competed in. Because Mitch is currently at 57, which is
huge,
really very good. Actually, there's only 1 man out of like the top guys. So just to let you know who I excluded: Bruce Wilhelm,
people that
Don
only do a few
Reinhardt.
shows, yeah.
Exactly, because your win rate's 100% if you only compete once and you won it. So Mitch's 57 puts him in 2nd place. The Dominator, Mariusz Pudzianowski, 70% win rate.
Wow.
And when you consider that he did 61 competitions compared to Mitch's 21 currently, like, that's really
Very
solid.
Impressive, yeah.
So behind Mitch, we have Zydrunas, finally not topping a list, but he competed so many times.
He did, and I think Zydrunas, and we'll put Brian in this as well, they almost did more damage by competing for a bit longer.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
When you look at when they were at their best, and then, I mean, Zydrunas even more so than Brian, he's just kept competing and having lower results than maybe when he's in his prime.
Yeah.
So if we kind of took those stats after their peak, if you like, it would have been much higher.
Yeah, I mean, it's 54% Zydrunas, so it's still really good. It's only 3% behind Mitch.
Yeah.
Thor is next with 44%. These aren't necessarily in order, but I wanted to compare Mitch against
the best guys.
The best guys, yeah. So Thor has 44%, Brian has 41.5%. I thought I'd look at guys like Yuko Wahala, who's a World's Strongest Man winner who came in, was very good, left the sport quite quickly.
Much shorter career, yeah.
Much shorter. His was actually only 50%. Only 50% is still very, very good. I looked at Magnus Ver as well because he won World's Strongest Man his first year. Mitch didn't manage that, but he was a bit of a phenom, wasn't he, for his era? 25% for Maggie.
Maggie as well went on and kept competing
for a very long
beyond
time.
his best years. But yeah, I mean, I think as an international athlete, 25% you'd be very happy with.
Of course you would, yeah. And we are comparing it against the best stats in the sport. Yeah. And of course, I had to throw in Bill Kazmaier as well, 43% for Bill. But again, Bill's a bit of an anomaly, isn't he? Because that was that stretch where
Bill's
he didn't get to
results,
much.
yeah.
And he came back and he wasn't as good. He'd suffered
I think Bill could have been higher on all types of lists if he was allowed to keep competing. Obviously, he came back, but beyond his best there.
Yeah.
But yes, some interesting stats there, and it shows how well Mitch is doing compared to the greats, and people are starting to talk about him as a great. He's still got work to do.
He does,
but
yeah.
I think that's good because you've got to have motivation as an athlete.
Yeah.
There's got to be things that make you want to get out of bed and go and train hard and put the effort in. And as Mitch's coach, I want to kind of keep challenging him and giving him these targets because he's a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah.
Just absolutely phenomenal. What he's done already is unbelievable. But you've got to keep that motivation and keep hungry. And, I think at the moment he is.
Now, I do like these stats videos because I love comparing things, but I do we should always take things with a pinch of salt because it's almost impossible to compare people from different eras because they're up against very different opposition. The events and weights and everything has evolved over time. Things go up and down all the time, don't they? So it's not like a cut and dry.
No, absolutely. There's many, many factors. I mean, if we go to Zydrunas and Brian, for instance, those two had to compete against each other.
Yes.
Which, put them in a different era, my goodness, they would have had some ridiculous results. Now, Mitch is in an era where there are great athletes out there, but no one seems to be kind of consistently challenging him. It's a little bit more. We've probably got more strength in depth.
We do, yes.
I keep saying this, but we've got hundreds of great strongmen now, whereas 20 years ago we had 5 great strongmen. It's the truth.
No, I know what you mean.
There's a big drop down in standard after sort of top 5, top 10, whereas now you can have a new guy come to a show who does really well.
Yeah, and you see that in the groups at Worlds now. You look at it and you go, God, that group's stacked.
Yeah.
But then you look at every group and it's the same.
You get 30 great athletes at Worlds, whereas before maybe it was 10 to 12.
Yeah.
And less in even earlier years. Obviously before 93 it was no even groups.
No groups. We just had
94 was the first year that we had groups at Worlds. So there's lots of factors that come into these things when we talk about stats. However, it's always fun to compare, and obviously you've kind of focused on the real
big players,
top players.
I go hard or go home.
No, exactly. And you want athletes who've competed a lot, not just 3 comps.
Yeah, exactly. You can't compare their careers if they didn't compete much.
Absolutely. I mean, it shows how impressive some of these athletes are. It shows what an incredible trajectory that Mitch is on currently. The question is going to be who can really challenge him. There are great athletes out there, but they've got to deliver, and that is the key. And I think if he stays motivated, Mitch can climb up the ranks of greatness, if you like, and maybe one day put himself in the top 3 or 4 of all time.
Thor's 2018 is often described as the absolute best year anyone's had in Strongman. I wanted to compare that with Mitch's 2024 so far and ask it I know you're his coach, but I think you're objective enough to give an honest answer. So let's have a quick look at what those years look like. So in 2018, Thor won everything that he competed in. So that included the Arnolds, Europe's Strongest Man, World's Strongest Man, Iceland's Strongest Man, and Dubai. That was the first ever Dubai. Mitch has competed 7 times so far this year. He still has 2 competitions to go as well. He won the Arnolds, the Arnold's UK. He came second at the World's Strongest Man. Then he's won the Strongman Classic, the Strongest Man on Earth, the Giants Live World Open, and the Giants Live USA Championships. So at this point, how do you think those 2 years compare?
They're very similar. Very, very similar. Now, obviously, at this point, you kind of have to say Thor, because he got the World's Strongest Man win, he got the Arnold's win, and the Worcester bye win. You'd class them as 3 majors.
They are 3 majors.
Iceland's you can't really kind of put into the same degree.
No.
Europe's is a big competition, though, so you kind of have to, take that into consideration. But the Arnold's, World's Strongest Man, and Worcester bye were 3 major shows. And winning Europe's is kind of like looking at, winning the World Tour Finals. It's just behind the majors, if you like.
So if Mitch won the World Tour Final and the Rogue Invitational this year, he would have 3 majors in the Arnold's, Rogue,
I was going to say, if Mitch can go on and win the next 2 competitions, I think you've almost got to give it to Mitch, even though he came second. Now, people can argue with me, and I'm up for the argument. I don't mind which way we look at it. I think they're both incredible. However, it's more competitions. The Strongest Man on Earth is one of the most brutal shows we've ever seen.
It really is, yeah.
So to win that this year, it was huge. And this is a big if, because he's got to go and do it, but if he goes on and wins the Rogue Invitational, that's 3 majors, plus a number of the shows just behind the major shows. It's more wins than Thor would have got in the same year. And obviously, he didn't win World's Strongest Man. Tom Stoltman was awesome at World's Strongest Man. I mean, if he won Worlds...
there'd be no question I think,
it.
no.
But it's both records are incredible. I think if he can go on and win the World Tour Finals and win Rogue, I would just nudge it to Mitch, because we have more comps now. The opportunities are getting greater and greater. But Thor did, was it 1, 2, 3, 4? Thor really did 4 comps.
He did 4
that year, plus a national title. Yeah. Mitch will be looking at 9 competitions, all big international shows, against great opposition. I'd give it to Mitch.
Yeah, I probably would too, and I'm a much bigger fan of Thor than I am of Mitch.
Well, I've always said Thor's year was the greatest, and he won everything. He was, and I'll still stand by saying that Thor that year was the best strongman we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think so
I would
too.
stand by that.
I
just
so
think
too.
the results you kind of have to give to Mitch, because it's more, there's more competitions. But I think when you actually look at how good he was that year, Thor was something special.
If you look into the nitty gritty of how he dominated,
and it's why it's like you said earlier, you can never take everything for granted. There's always factors that come into these things, and it's why I'd be totally up for the discussion and happy for people to go either way with this.
It's not black and white.
Not at all. And
let's
just say they're both incredible.
Yeah, they are.
Seriously, they are. Right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Just a bit of a fun one today. As always, if you enjoy what we do, do not forget, like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time.